Hi class, today we'll be working on the War of 1812. Please go ahead and write down any questions that you have as I go through this, in case there's anything that is confusing, so you can ask me next class. Also, I apologize if you hear any cats or dogs in the background. That is a very likely thing that's going to happen here tonight. Um, also, I am surprise, surprise, not very good when it comes to video editing. So if I make a mistake, instead of figuring out how to go back and splice things, I'm just going to say sorry and move forward and correct myself. I'm sure you can figure it out. All right, so here we go. We left off last class talking about Thomas Jefferson's second term and specifically the issue of impressment. So the Napoleonic Wars had started again. Tensions were rising now once again between Britain and France. And Britain and France was engaged in a time of economic warfare. Both Britain and both the British and the French started seizing our cargo, and they were basically trying to make sure that the other side couldn't eat our food. They were trying to starve them, the other side, to death. So they started seizing our cargo, and we deeply resented it, but we actually really hated it more coming from the British because they did it more often. Also, they were much bolder about how they did it. The French would capture our ships back in Europe when they were close to France, and it took a ton of time to get the news back over to the United States. So by the time we actually heard about the ship, we didn't care as much. The British, however, took our ships right off the coast, right off of the American coast, the East Coast. Warships were actually cruising about 5 miles off, and people could actually see the British take our ships. It's a totally, oh no, went to sleep. I'll keep going. It was a totally different thing to actually see our ships being taken versus hearing about it a few months later. Another factor in all this is that Britain was a traditional enemy. Hello, American Revolution, and they had impressed our men. They had a lot of deserters in their British Navy. They never actually claimed the right to impress Americans, but they did claim the right to impress English subjects. However, in all of this, about 15,000 Americans were impressed into the British Navy. All right, so the British Navy is messing things up, and by June of 1807, we have a little crisis that's going to bring us to the brink of war. This is called the Chesapeake Incident. The USS Chesapeake was an American naval vessel, so it was a vessel of the United States Navy, not a merchant ship as others had been. It had actually just left for the Barbary Mediterranean, and it was signaled by the HMS Leopard, a British warship. Their captain had information that there were deserters on it. This basically was an act of war. You have no right to request or search a naval vessel. The Americans refused, and then they played rough. The Leopard attacked the Chesapeake, and they were forced to be searched. So as the British were searching the ships, they did find one was a deserter, and then there were three other guys who were impressed who actually were Americans. One of those men was African American, so we are pretty sure he was American. The Chesapeake then is going to go back to the harbor, back to the United States, and the entire country goes nuts. And they started demanding war against Britain. Jefferson, though, is going to opt away from that course. We are not at all ready to fight the English. He was able to secure, actually, from the British government a complete disavowal of what the Leopard captain had done. The English government apologized. They were actually very skilled at diplomacy, and they actually reassigned the Leopard to the other side of the world. Jefferson is going to do the courageous thing here, and he is going to stand up to the American people and say, no, we are not going to go to war. Instead, what he is going to do, it ends up being his big bonehead mistake, but probably not as much of a mistake as if we'd actually gone to war in that moment. He is going to, Congress will pass the Embargo Act. The Embargo Act is something that will look good on paper, but we can really see its flaws. Basically, it says we are going to close off all of our trade. We're not going to trade with anyone. The British and the French needed our food, and we thought if we deny it, they will be nice to us. The American, so actually no American ships were allowed to leave the ports. This is going to close trade actually with the whole world, and because we are Americans, our smuggling goes through the roof. And also 1807, 1808, Britain had the best farm harvest in about 400 years. So in about 6 months, the embargo was a complete disaster. We really shot ourselves in the foot. And our inability to ship is going to hurt both the shippers and the farmers. And the farmers are really the bottom line here. They are the base of the Democratic Republican Party. And Jefferson, though, is going to see this, and he is going to be quick to admit that this was a disaster. And actually, the last act of his presidency is going to repeal this Embargo Act. And it was set to be repealed in early 1809. We really overestimated our worth to the rest of the world's trade. England didn't actually need to trade with us the way we needed to trade with them. Same with France. So it just was a really terrible idea. So in early 1809, the Embargo Act is going to be repealed and replaced by something called the Non-Intercourse Act. Jefferson is going to be on his way out of office. James Madison is then going to be our fourth president. Wait, there he is. Okay, there he is. Madison's going to be our fourth president. And Jefferson, though, he had this moment, I would say it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. In his inaugural address, he made a comment about leaving more disliked than when you came in, and that was the case with Jefferson.